الله أكبر. على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها فحبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة. سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على
On the day of Ashura, when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam looked up towards the heavens and uttered those immortal words, Hal min nasirin yansuruna, knowing full well that there was no one there on the plains of Karbala to come to assist him, he wasn't speaking to the people of 61AH, he was talking to us, me and you. And today, sitting here 1400 years later, we send our reply to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We say to Imam al-Hussein, we will stand up for your message and stand against what you stood against. And we say, Labbaik ya Hussein to Imam. So everybody raise your hands and 5 times we'll say, Labbaik ya Hussein. And remember, these aren't just lip services, these are a pledge from the heart. So everybody together, Labbaik ya Hussein, Labbaik ya Hussein, Labbaik ya Hussein, Labbaik ya Hussein, Labbaik ya Hussein. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before we begin, let's light the candles of our Iman. Nara Takbir. Nara Takbir. And after taking the name of our pure Lord, let's invite the Amatul Tahirin to come and join us. Nara Risalat. Nara Risalat. Dono haath buland karke. Nara Haidari. Bare digar ek Nara Haidari. Baaz-e buland tar salawat.
Before commencing, we would just like to extend our most heartfelt gratitude for inviting us here today to partake in the azadari of Imam Sajjads alayhi salam. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may He take your community from strength to strength, and may He give the youth and the children more motivation, more enthusiasm, more drive to serve the Ahlul Bayt, inshaAllah. And inshallah, we pray that may our azadari, our tears, be accepted by Bibi Pak, Salamullahi alayha. But Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
چند اشار توجہ چاہتا ہوں. نازی سے فکر پیمبر سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. نازی سے فکر پیمبر سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. ارے گھر تو ملنا ہی نہیں, بس در سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. نازی سے فکر پیمبر سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. گھر تو ملنا ہی نہیں, بس در سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. ارے 1-2 دن نہیں, صدیوں کی اجازت ہے تمہیں. 1-2 دن نہیں, صدیوں کی اجازت ہے تمہیں. تو علی چھوڑ دے اصغر سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. تو علی چھوڑ دے اصغر سا کوئی ڈھونڈ کے لا. تو شاید اس لیے حضرت علی اصغر نے یہ کہا ہوگا کہ یہ فرات میری ہے میدان کربلا میرا. یہ فرات میری ہے میدان کربلا میرا. نہ دیکھ عمر میری دیکھ حوصلہ میرا. نہ دیکھ عمر میری دیکھ حوصلہ میرا. ابو تراب سے ملتا ہے سلسلہ میرا. ہے جسم شیروں کی آغوش میں پلا میرا. ہے جسم شیروں کی آغوش میں پلا میرا. تو غلط ہے کہ صرف برانے دلیر ہوتے ہیں. غلط ہے کہ صرف برانے دلیر ہوتے ہیں. میرے گھرانے میں بچے بھی شیر ہوتے ہیں. یا علی یا علی.
On the night of Ashura, when Imam Hussein was getting ready for the war ahead the next day, it is said from tent to tent there was a different scene, different situation. In one tent, Bibi Zainab was getting on in Muhammad ready for the war ahead. In one tent, Hazrat Qasim was pacing backwards and forwards, asking his mother whether he can go and fight the next day. In one tent, there is a lady rocking a small cradle with a baby inside it. And in one tent, Imam al-Hussein has his daughter on his chest. And he says to his daughter, "Oh Sakina, tomorrow, this chest that you've been sleeping on from the day you were born will be no more. But let me ask you a question. Those of you who have children, what do children understand about death? How do children understand that you will not be there anymore?" So this is in the words of a poet, where he describes this final conversation between Imam Hussein and his daughter. کر رہا ہے یہ راوی بیاں کربلا اس نے عاشور کی شب کا منظر لکھا سینہ شاہ پابت شاہ خدا، اور شبیر کہتے تھے یہ بارہا، ہم کو جانا ہے کل کرنے وعدہ وفا، تم پہ آئے گا اب صبر کا مرحلہ، بات ساری سکینہ نے شہ کی سنی، اور جواباً وہ بس اتنا کہتی رہی، اچھا بابا سلانے تو آؤ گے نا، روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا، بولے شبیر اے میری نور نظر، تم کو کرنا ہے اب شام تک کا سفر، تم کو قیدی بنائیں گے اب اہل شہر، بولی شہزادی مجھ کو نہیں کوئی ڈر، تم کہو تم سلانے تو آؤ گے نا،
روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا،
شاہ کہنے لگے اے میری لاڈلی، تم پہ آئے گی اب شام غم کی گھڑی، آگ دامنے میں ہوگی تمہارے لگی، بولی وہ فکر مجھ کو نہیں ہے کوئی، میرا دامن بجھانے تو آؤ گے نا،
روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا،
مضطرب دل سے کہنے لگے شاہدی، تیری قسمت میں بیٹی سکون اب نہیں، اب تماچے لگائے گا، اب تماچے لگائے گا شمرے لئی، سن کے یہ بات کہنے لگی وہ حزین، شمر سے تم بچانے تو شمر سے تم بچانے تو آؤ گے نا،
روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا،
پھر کیا شہ نے بیٹی سے کچھ یوں سخن، سب حرم ہوں گے اب تو اسیر محل، تیرے ہاتھوں میں بھی اب بندھے گی رسل، بولی یہ بات سن کے وہ تشنا دہن، تم گلے سے لگانے جگانے تو آؤ گے نا،
روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا،
رو کے شبیر نے اس کے بوسے لیے، بولے رخسار بھی ہوں گے زخمی تیرے، تیرے رونے کے شہزادی دن آ گئے، بولی تم کیسے دیکھو گے روتے ہوئے، ہاں مجھے چپ کرانے تو آؤ گے نا،
روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا،
ہائے بڑھتی جاتی تھی بے چینی شبیر کی، ہر ستم وہ اٹھانے پہ راضی ہوئی، زندہ بابا نہ ہوں گے سمجھ نہ سکی، سن کے سب مشکلیں بس وہ کہتی رہی، گھر میں روٹھی منانے تو آؤ گے نا،
روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا.
اب یہ منظر سن لے آپ. بی بی یہ کیا جواب دیتی ہے؟ لکھ کے سلمان دل پھٹ رہا ہے میرا، ہائے جب شاہ والا نے رو کر کہا اب تو زندان مرقد بنے گا تیرا، بیٹی سابق کی تھی بولی وہ صابرہ، میرا لاشا میرا لاشا اٹھانے تو میرا لاشا اٹھانے تو آؤ گے نا، روز چہرہ دکھانے تو آؤ گے نا. After the day of Ashura went, and the night of Sham Ghariba came, this little girl, this little daughter of Hussein, she couldn't lie on the burning plains of Karbala. She couldn't sleep. She gets up and she runs into the battlefield. But you see, in this day and age when we have lights, then in the pitch black she couldn't see anything. Every time she was running, she was falling over a dead body. Every time she was running into a pool of blood. She looks up into the sky and she says, بے گور و بے کفن ہے بابا تمہارا لاشا، ہے خون کا سمندر اور رات کا اندھیرا، سینہ تمہارا بابا لاشوں میں ڈھونڈتی ہوں، پاس اپنے بلا لو بابا میں ڈھونڈتی ہوں، جنگل میں کھو گئی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو ہائے ایک بار بس مسینے پر سونا چاہتی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو.
She says, بس یہ مجھے بتا دو میں کیسے تم کو پاؤں دن رات یاد کر کے بابا میں مر نہ جاؤں پھیلائے ہاتھ اپنے پھیلائے ہاتھ اپنے میدان میں کھڑی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو.
اصغر کو لے کے بابا میدان میں سو گئے ہو سوئے جہاں ہو بابا مجھ کو وہیں بلا لو گودی میں کیا تمہارے میں بھی نہیں پلی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو.
She says, امو میرے کہاں ہو تم شیر باوفا ہو بالی میری چھنی ہے دامن جلا ہے دیکھو مانگوں گی اب نہ پانی بس اتنا چاہتی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو.
اب کھا لیے تماچے چادر چھینی ہے سر سے کانوں سے خون ہے جاری گھبرا رہی ہوں ڈر سے میری طرف بھی دیکھو کس حال میں پڑی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو.
And then when she can't hear any reply back, she gets worried and she says, کیا آ رہی ہے تم تک رونے کی یہ صدائیں اے کربلا سنا دو اے کربلا سنا دو بابا کو یہ ندائیں بیٹھی ہوئی زمین پر میں ہاتھ جوڑتی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو.
سن کر صدا تجانی ایک لاش نے پکارا آؤ میری سکینہ آؤ میری سکینہ بابا ہوں میں تمہارا کہنا نہ اب میری جان بابا میں کھو گئی ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو. In the prisons of Sham, when this little girl arrived, she was chained up and her body was treated in such a way that when she died, her body was covered in bruises from top to bottom. But she cried so much that one night the guards went to Yazid, may Allah curse him, And they said, this girl is crying so much, what should we do? He said, give her her father's head. When Sakina got her father's head, she took her into her arms. First thing she did is she cleaned his face, and she took all the dust and blood off his face. What did she say to him? She says, oh father, know one thing, I have no complaints. Just remember that at every step of the way, I have only remembered you. She says to her father, Shimr karta tha sitam, mujhko darane ke liye, oonth dohrata raha, mujhko girane ke liye. ہائے وہ ظالم نے میرے رخساروں پہ ہے تماچے مارے، انگلیوں کے ہیں نشان، دیکھ لو ایک بار ادھر،
ہر مصیبت پہ تجھے یاد کیا ہے بابا،
دھوپ میں چلنے سے پیروں میں پڑے ہیں چھالے، دادی کی طرح میرے دن بھی ہوئے ہیں کالے. یہ سنیے، ایک رسن بارہ گلے، میں ہوں چھوٹی سب سے، چلنا دو بھر تھا مجھے. بی بی کیا فرماتی ہے؟ میں لٹک جا ایک رسن بارہ گلے، میں ہوں چھوٹی سب سے، چلنا دوبھر تھا مجھے، میں لٹک جاتی تھی سب چلتے جو دوران سفر.
ہر مصیبت پہ تجھے یاد کیا ہے بابا،
چلتے چلتے مجھے ہو جاتی تھی اے بابا تھکن، شدت پیاس سے جلتا تھا میرا سارا بدن، سایہ ملتا جو کہیں بیٹھ جاتی جو وہیں آتا تھا شمر لئی. سایہ ملتا جو کہیں ارے بیٹھ جاتی جو وہیں آتا تھا شمر لئی. تازیانے کی اذیت میں بتاؤں کیوں کر،
ہر مصیبت پہ تجھے یاد کیا ہے بابا.
میری دادی نے بھی دربار کا منظر دیکھا، پسلیاں ٹوٹ گئی، جلتا ہوا در دیکھا. میں بھی ناقے سے گری ہو گئی ہوں زخمی، میری پسلی ٹوٹی، جل گیا کرتا میرا छीना गया मेरा गोहर।
हर मुसीबत पे तुझे याद किया है बाबा।
आज भी आँखों में है शाम गरीबा बाबा, मुझको दौरा के लिए ने मेरा बूंदा छीना। सिमर की वो सेली मुंह के बल जो मैं गिरी और बेहोश हुई, भूल पाऊंगी मैं ना बाबा कभी वो मंज़र।
हर मुसीबत पे तुझे याद किया है बाबा।
एक नोहे में निगार आ नहीं सकता वो बयान, दर्द में डूबी है जानी के नोहे की जुबान। बाप के सिर को लिए बहन बची ने किए, सारे कैदी रोए, बच्ची कहती रही और बच्ची कहती रही और रोता रहा बाप का सर. After this little girl passed away, it is said when the women of Sham were giving her ghusl, there was a scream heard and they came to Imam Sajjads. They said to Imam, "Oh Imam, we have just 3 questions for you." Imam said, "What is it and why are you screaming and crying so much?" They said the first question is, was this little girl ill in some way? Because all we can see is fungus growing all over her body. Imam says, you know these blue and black and yellow and green that you see? That is from where Shimmer used to slap her and hit her. He says, what's the second question? They say when we keep putting water on her head to give her ghusl, her hair is falling out. Imam Sajjads used to say, Imam Sajjads said to them, that you see when Shimmer used to speak to her, he never spoke to her looking down at her. He used to pick her from her hair and lift her up. Imam says, what's the third question? They say when we're giving her kafan, we can't take her clothes off. And now there's 2 riwayat for this. I'll give you one riwayat. Imam says, in the bazaar of Sham, we were meant to stand in multiple places. And people used to throw things that are stones. You see, there was this one woman that used to hate us a lot. She poured boiling water upon us, and all that boiling water went onto the body of my sister, and her skin melted in such a way that it became one with the clothes she was wearing. I will tell you one riwayat that I heard recently. When there's an alim who not too long ago had this dream where he saw Bibi Sakina. And he saw this little girl and she said to him, "Oh man, move my body from where it is, because there's water entering my grave." The alim thought the first night this was a premonition, a dream, but he left it. The second night, the third night, he said, this must be a sign that I have to go and do this. So he sent his daughters to move the body or exhume the grave of Sakina and move her body to another grave. The daughters came back crying. The man said, the alim said to his daughters, he said, what's the problem? They said, "Father, you said that this girl was beaten and slapped in her life." "Yes, I told you that. But were you not prepared?" They said, "Yes, we were prepared." He said, they said that you told us that she didn't have a coffin on her when she died. The father said, "Did I not tell you that?" They said, "Yes, you told us that." But they said, "Father, you did not tell us one thing." He said, "What is that?" He said, when we took her out of the grave, her hands were still in the ropes that she was originally tied in. Her hands and feet were still bound in those ropes. Sayyidah Zainab comes back to Karbala for the Arba'een, and she comes to the grave of her brother. And she says to her brother, Pursalo apni sakina ka, mere maa jaaye, jisko armaan tha usko hi nahi la paaye. گھر چلو کہتی رہی آخری دم تک ہائے، اس کو بہلاتی رہی جلدی چلیں گے ہم گھر، معاف کرنا
معاف کرنا مجھے، معاف کرنا.
بھائی جاپ کو بھیجا ہے سکینہ نے سلام، اپنے امو کے لیے ہے یہ بھتیجی کا پیام. ارے بجھ گئی پیاس شکایت کا نہیں کوئی کلام، پانی کے واسطے شرمندہ ہے امو کیوں کر.
معاف کرنا معاف کرنا.
ننھی سی جان اٹھائی ہے جفائیں کیا کیا، ایک شرابی نے کنیزی کے لیے جب مانگا، میرا سجاد بھی غیرت سے لہو رو دیا تھا، بڑی حسرت سے ہمیں دیکھ رہی تھی مضطر.
معاف کرنا معاف کرنا.
چھوڑ کر آئی ہوں زندہ میں سکینہ کو، معاف کرنا. پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 9. Surah At-Tawbah. We will need from verse number 44, but the main verse that we'll be looking at tonight, inshaAllah, is verse number 47. So we'll start with 47. We'll go back to 44 and then read forward again to 47. So please open your Qur'ans, Surah At-Tawbah, chapter number 9, from verse 44 to verse 47. For the love of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the following marhumeen. Marhum Sayyid Abbas Qamar Zaidi, Marhuma Naseem Bai, and Marhum Bahadur Ali Raza Mauji. For them and for all of the marhumeen of our community, Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, iyyaka na'budu For the love of the awaited Savior of humanity, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillahi alladhi hadana li hadha wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادكم إلا خبالا ولا أوضعوا خلالكم يبغونكم الفتنة وفيكم سماعون لهم والله عليم بالظالمين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. In the Grand Masjid of Kufa, Imam Sajjads alayhi salam delivers one of his two famous sermons. There is one in front of Yazid Mal'un, and there is also one in front of Ibn Ziyad. May Allah curse Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam ajma'een. Curse Banu Umayyah. La'natullahi alayhim ajma'een. In these two sermons, it is narrated both times that Imam Sajjads alayhi salam said, for those of you who know me, and he begins to explain who he is. Both times, Imam Sajjads alayhi salam creates a tumult, and people begin to weep and cry and begin to realize the gravity of the crimes that they have committed against Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. In Masjid Kufa, when he makes this cry, when he makes this sermon and the people respond to him, the people of Kufa offer their support to Imam Sajjads alayhi salam and say to him, give us the command, we will rise for you, and we will overthrow Yazid and we will take him to account. Surprisingly, the response of Imam Sajjads alayhi salam is not one of encouragement. He doesn't say, yes, thank you, I want your support. Yes, you should be following me, Imam Ma'soom. Yes, you must overthrow Yazid. This is a compulsory act upon you. He doesn't say this. In fact, the Imam discourages the Shia from uprising and siding with the Imam at that moment. What he says is, my only request of you is that you are neither with us nor against us. What I want to be able to do tonight, inshallah, is look at this sermon and look at this statement from Imam Sajjads alayhi salam and ask why an Imam Ma'soom would say no to help from his Shia, especially those who have listened to his words and responded directly to him. And what we'll find is that on many occasions, because the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam could not trust their Shia to fulfill the expectations upon them, the Imam would prefer them not to rise and not to participate in the movement with him, because they would be more of a liability for the Imam than actually an aid for the Imam. And this is a very deep lesson for you and I, especially if we imagine the coming of our 12th Holy Imam, Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif. What we're going to do tonight, inshallah, is look at the following things. Number one, in the Quran, where do we see that Allah even says that there were mu'mineen, believers, or rather hypocrites, people who claimed to be believers, who would go to the front line and the battle with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but their presence with the Prophet was more of a hindrance to the Prophet than supporting the Prophet. Where do we find this in the Quran? Number one. Number two, we want to be able to look at how Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have spoken about their own community of followers, us, and sometimes mention them in the context of being more disruptive, more harmful to their movement than Dajjal himself. And yet on the other side, there are those Shia who are truly helpful to the Imam, and the Imam sends salutations upon these individuals and lauds these individuals. And then number three, to also think about that in the contexts in which we live in, and how many a times in many different manifestations, we can see that our own selves can be actually more harmful to our community than beneficial. More harmful to the Muslim community than beneficial. More harmful to our own communities than beneficial. And it requires us to be very honest with ourselves as to whether we're actually holding the community back or pushing it forward. Because many a time, Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have said, we need to introspect, and if we're more harmful, then actually it's better that we're not in those positions to do more harm than good. We have to work very diligently to have insight on these matters, to be able to see whether we would actually be more of a drain on the Imam Ma'soom, or whether we actually are genuinely in support of the Imam's movement. This is a very precarious sort of discussion, because the moment one really thinks hard and says, when I come to the community and I take a position, or I take a stance, or I do something in the outside world, or there is a video of me circulating and my behavior as representing the Shia or representing the Muslim community, immediately asks us, would the Imam approve or disapprove? Well, at times the Imam absolutely disapproved of the behaviors of his own Shia, to the extent where he said, don't help me, don't participate with me, because actually this is more harmful to me than good. So what I want to do is to read to you a little bit of the sermon and the response from the Shia of Kufa, and then how the Imam actually words it to say, don't rise with me. And then inshallah we go into the Quran and some of the ahadith that helps us to be able to build this picture of a very important narration from our fourth holy Imam Zaynal Abidin salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Time and time again I've shown you this work called The Chronicles of the Martyrdom of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. It is recently published a few years back, and arguably the best available source for the history of Karbala, the entire Maqtal, from the beginning of the movement to the post-Medina times, after the Arba'in. And It gives to you the original ahadith in the Arabic as well as the translation in English. And so I always remind you and recommend to be able to purchase and read this book so we know exactly what occurred according to the authentic sources of the history of Karbala. So, I'm going to read to you, inshallah, a part of the speech, just a brief part to give you a flavor of what occurred in Kufa in front of Ibn Ziyad and the Kufans. You all know the Kufans were the ones who wrote to Imam Sajjads alayhi salam, or Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam en masse, and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam responded, and you know that they ended up, many of them, on the battlefield against Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, ended up killing Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, despite them being the ones to give their support to Muslim ibn Aqil, give their support to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So this is quoted from the book Al-Malhuf, which is one of the most reputable sources of the Maqtal of Karbala. It says the following: Imam Zaynal Abidin alayhi salam gestured to the people to be silent. As you heard from the Gham, you can imagine how many times stones were thrown at Imam Sajjads alayhi salam. How many times they used to scream abuse at Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Imam Sajjads gestured to the people to be silent. When they fell silent, Imam stood up, praised Allah, glorified Allah, mentioned the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the Prophet deserved to be mentioned, and then said the following: O people, those of you who know me, but those of you who do not know me, I will introduce myself. I am Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. I am the son of the man who was slaughtered at the banks of the river Euphrates, without having been given cause for vengeance or blame. I am the son of the one whose sanctity was violated, whose bounties were taken, whose possessions were plundered, whose family was imprisoned. I am the son of the one who was killed while he was steadfast, and that is sufficient for me to be proud of this. O people, I ask you in the name of Allah, do you know that you wrote to my father and then betrayed him? And you gave him your sworn oath, your covenant, and pledged your allegiance, and then fought against him and abandoned him? May you perish for what you have sent forth for yourselves. What an evil decision you have made. This is part of the sermon that was mentioned in Kufa. At this point, raised voices could be heard from every side. People began shouting. People began screaming and crying, realizing what crime they have committed. They said, according to the narration, you, as in each other in Kufa, you have been ruined whilst you don't realize what you have done. Imam Sajjads alayhi salam now responds, may Allah have mercy on the person who accepts my warning and keeps in mind my advice about Allah, His Messenger, His progeny, for we have in Allah's Messenger an excellent example. Now, the Kufans, the Shia of Kufa, they offer themselves to help Imam Sajjads alayhi salam rise up. They replied, Yabna Rasulillah, we will listen and obey. All of us, we will listen and obey. We will safeguard your trusts, neither being neglectful to your rights, nor turning away from you. Command us, for we will fight in your battles and be at peace with those whom you make peace with. We will take Yazid to account and disassociate from those who oppressed you and oppressed us. So clearly the Shia and the people of Kufa are offering themselves to go to battle, to overthrow Yazid, Mal'un, to assist the Imam in establishing his rightful Khilafat. Don't you imagine? It should be upon Imam Sajjads alayhi salam to respond in the affirmative, say, yes, I want you alongside me. Shouldn't an Imam Ma'soom say this? He doesn't say this. He responds with the following words: you will never do this. What you have said, what you have promised me, you will never do this. O people of treachery and cunning, Your base desires have control over you. Do you mean to do to me what you did to my father? The same way you gave a false promise to my father, Husayn ibn Ali, and then left him. Nay, you actually were the ones to kill him. You will do to me what you have done to my father. Do you mean to do to me what you did to my father? Never. I swear by the Lord of the cosmos, indeed that wound has not healed. My father, may God bless him, was killed just yesterday alongside his family. The memory of God's messenger and the loss of my father and his sons remains etched in my mind. Its bitterness fills my mouth. Its bile courses through the depth of my heart. And then he says this line, وَمَسْأَلَتِي أَنْ لَا تَكُونُوا لَنَا وَلَا عَلَيْنَا. My only request from you is that you are neither to stand with us nor to stand against us. Subhanallah. What a statement from Imam Sajjads alayhi salam. Now think about this question. Why would the Imam say, don't stand with us? I mean, the second half of the statement, don't stand against us. It's obvious, isn't it? It's a clear statement. No Imam would say, stand against us. So he says, don't stand against us. Obvious. But the Imam says, don't stand with us. What a shocking statement from an Imam Ma'soom to say, Shia, I don't want you along my side. And the answer is, because the Imam has seen time and time again, every time these Kufans have pledged their allegiance to an Imam Ma'soom, they have let him down. Salamullahi alayhim ajma'in. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, asked for his army to rise. And he said to them, one last push, we will finish off Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Once and for all, we can put Banu Umayyah to bed. They responded, saying, we don't want to go. In Nahj al-Balagha, Imam complains about his own Shia and his army. You know what he says? If I was to say to you, rise in summer, you will say it's too hot, wait till winter. And if I was to wait for you to rise up in winter, you will say it's too cold. This is what my Shia are like, he says. And what happened? Afterwards, Imam is martyred on the 19th and then 21st of Shahr Ramadan. Imam al-Hasan, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, says exactly the same thing. Rise up with me. We can put Muawiyah to bed. We can finish this fitna off. Not only did they not want to rise with Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, his own Shia were bribed so easily, one even struck him in the thigh with a small axe, pulled Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam to the ground, attempted to assassinate the Imam. Only a few of his supporters managed to save Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam from that outcome. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, I've seen how the Kufans, you have dealt with him. My brother Hassan, I have seen how you Kufans have dealt with him. My father Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, I have seen how you have dealt with him. That you wrote to him, that you pledged your swords to Muslim ibn Aqil. 18,000 of you were behind him in Salat al-Maghrib. By the time Salat al-Isha came, there was about a handful of you behind him. You left him to run in the streets, and ultimately his body severed from his head severed from his shoulders, and his body dragged through the streets of Kufa. Can I trust you, Kufans? La takunu alayna, do not be for us, and do not be against us. Can you see? Now, before we talk about this in some more context from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam and from our own contexts, we need to see how this is actually mentioned in the Quran as well. Because of course everything that Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam experience and explain is first found in the Holy Quran and the experience of our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. The Prophet says, "Ma udhiya nabiyya mithla ma udhit." No prophet has had to undergo what I have had to undergo. So whatever experiences Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam explain to us, it starts off being in the Quran. Please open your Qurans to chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah. Verse number 47. We'll read 47 and then we'll go backwards to 44, inshaAllah. Remember, Imam says, I've seen the way you've dealt with 3 other Imams from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. I have no confidence that if you rise or you tell me you're going to be with me, that you will actually follow through, because your history and your example tells me something else. In fact, if you were to say you're going to rise and I was going to believe you, then I'll put myself at risk, the same way my father put himself at risk. Have a look at this verse. Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 47. This sequence of verses is about the Battle of Tabuk. You'll remember in the Battle of Tabuk, the Prophet ﷺ left Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam behind in Medina to be the representative of the Prophet. The army goes out and Imam has to manage the city, the protection of the city. He has to manage the affairs of the city, the economy and the business of the city, the tribes of the city, the Jews, the Christians, the Zoroastrians. Everything is under the watch of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the sequence of verses. Verse 47. Now there are some people who didn't want to go to the battlefield. And there are some people who would go to the battlefield but didn't want to assist the Prophet in war. And some people that if they were to do this, they would go to the battlefield, but they would do everything they could to escape the battlefield. They would say, yeah, we're with you, Ya Rasulullah. Don't worry, you can rely on our support. Our sword is yours. But when the moment came, they would run from the battlefield, or they would swap out with others on the battlefield. What would happen? This would leave gaps in the army. So this would cause more problems from the Prophet than support for the Prophet. It's in this context this ayah is revealed. Verse 47, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لَوْ خَرَجُوا فِيكُمْ مَا زَادُوكُمْ إِلَّا خَبَالًا. Had they gone forth with you, these hypocrites, these so-called believers, had they gone forth with you, they would not have added to you anything, Ya Rasulullah, except corruption. Is it better for you, Ya Rasulullah, to have them or not have them with you? Which one? Not have them. Because if they actually go forward, they're going to leave gaps, they're going to ruin the morale of people, they're not going to fight, they're going to be easily fleeing, and all of the problems are going to snowball off the back of that. لَوْ خَرَجُوا فِيكُمْ مَا زَادُوكُمْ إِلَّا خَبَالًا. Had they gone forth with you, they would not have added anything except corruption. وَلَا أَوْضَعُوا خِلَالَكُمْ يَبْغُونَكُمُ الْفِتْنَةِ. And they would have certainly hurried about seeking to sow dissension amongst the ranks. وَفِيكُمْ سَمَّعُونَ لَهُمْ. And then amongst you are those who would listen to them. They would have an effect on others. So when they go about saying, I don't think we're going to win this battle, I don't think we're going to be able to get any spoils of war, I don't really believe that Muhammad is going to lead us to victory, what's it going to do into the hearts of others? Others are going to listen to them, and it's going to cause doubts in the hearts of others. It's going to be a domino effect, one by one within the army. They're going to also lose heart. Wallahu alimun bil-zalimeen. Allah knows those who are unjust. In the Quran, Allah tells you there are times when it's actually better that those people who say they're going to be with you, but they aren't really going to assist you on the journey, it's better not for them to be with you, Ya Rasulullah. You see? You see in the earlier verses, from verse 44, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins this sequence. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لا يستأذنك الذين يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر أن يجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم. They do not ask leave of you, those who really believe. They do not ask to be away from the battlefield. They don't ask to be excused from supporting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They believe in the last day and striving hard for their profit, with themselves and with their properties and with their persons. Allah knows who these people are. Wallahu alimun bil muttaqin. Allah knows those who truly guard against evil. Do you know who this verse was revealed about? Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen never wanted to leave the battlefield. So Allah praises him. He says, Allah knows that there are those who don't ask to leave the battlefield. Verse 45. إنما يستأذنك الذين لا يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر. But there are those who do ask leave of you. They don't really believe in Allah and the latter day. And their hearts are in doubt. And so in their doubt, they constantly waver. وَارْتَابَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ فَهُمْ فِي رَيْبِهِمْ يَتَرَدَّدُونَ. Because they are in doubt, they constantly waver. They can be with the Prophet, they will waver. They can have seen 100 victories from the Prophet, they'll still waver. No matter what you ask of them, they will still waver. It was there at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you can see how Imam Sajjads alayhi salam understood these things. It's very interesting. We find here that Imam has seen the experiences of his father, his uncle, his grandfather. He's seen previously the way the Shia have responded and then let him down, let the family down, Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam down. So he knows how they are. We, the Shia, have been given many descriptions within the books of Ahadith, both positive and negative from Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam. Because Ahlul Bayt realized and understood that the Shia were not all the same. There were those who could be relied upon and those who would not be relied upon. And in regards to those who could not be relied upon, they gave grave and constant warnings for us to A, understand such people, B, to make sure that we would never be amongst those people who could not be relied upon by the Imam of our time. And so it's very important that we actually take time to introspect and think about, if Imam was here and Imam called me, what would stop me from going forward? Whom would stop me from going forward? What position or wealth or power or threat would stop me from going forward? Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam have described us in certain ways. And they're very interesting to see the way in which Imam wants us to understand how dangerous some people are to the Imam's movement and actually holds the Imam's movement back. We think that by our presence and participation that we're actually doing good. But the Imam actually says to his own Shia, don't even be for me, let alone being against me. Because if you are for me, then actually it's going to do me more harm. I, Imam Sajjads, can deal with Ibn Ziyad. I can speak such haqq and I can put him in his place. I can deal with Yazid. I can put him in his place. Haqq will be manifested from me. My problem is when you offer me support but then you revoke it at the last minute. You tell me you're going to be with me, but actually you do more harm to my movement than good. I want to read to you a few hadith which are really astounding narrations. So I'm reading to you from a compilation of works from Shaykh al-Saduq alayhi rahmah. Shaykh al-Saduq had different works, one called Al-Mawa'idh, the sermons which warn people, Sifat al-Shia, the qualities of the Shia, the good qualities of the Shia, and Fada'il al-Shia, the merits of the Shia, and this is compiled into one book. Shaykh al-Saduq, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, is considered our greatest of muhaddithin. He is the greatest of all the compilers of ahadith, one of our earliest scholars. I'm going to read to you a few ahadith that Shaykh al-Saduq alayhi rahmah compiled. First hadith, this one comes to us from our sixth holy Imam, Jaffer ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. And this is in regards to the people of Kufa, the Shia of Kufa, to give context to what Imam Sajjads alayhi salam is saying. So Imam Sajjads, fourth Imam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, sixth Imam. So you can see that in the space of two Imams, how an Imam describes the people of Kufa, the Shia of Kufa. Have they changed their ways and their behaviors? Have they learned from what happened to Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, the statement of Imam al-Sajjads alayhi salam? Let's see. Hadith comes from Al-Mufaddal bin Qais that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam asked him about the number of Shia in Kufa. He says to him, Kam Shi'atuna bil Kufa? How many Shia are there in Kufa? Qultu 50,000, 50,000 Shia in Kufa. Imam responded, do you hope that there were less? If I said to you, how many Shia are there in Leeds? How many Shia are there in Bradford, for example? And you say to me, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000. And I said to you, do you wish that there were less Shia in Bradford? It would be a strange statement, wouldn't it? You'd say, why would I want there to be less Shia in Bradford? Surely we want more Shia. Do you wish that they were less? Do you wish that they were 25,000? Do you wish that they were 5,000? Do you wish that there was 1,000? Imam continued reducing the number. By Allah, I swear, I wish that there were 25 Shia, provided that they would truly acknowledge our beliefs and say nothing but the truth about us. I would rather 25 diligent followers than 50,000 that are going to cause us more problems than good. Incredible set of statements from Imam, isn't it? But look at this hadith, it's very interesting how the Imam clarifies what he wants in the Shia. Acknowledge our beliefs, meaning what? If we state something about aqa'id, follow it. Don't make up your own aqa'id just because it's popular at this time, just because it's what the Shia do as a culture. I would rather our Shia follow our beliefs, not establish their own beliefs. And I would rather that they say about us nothing but the truth. No ghulu, no excessives, no shortenings on our standards and our merits. I'd rather them just say what is true about us. Why? Because when we do naqs on the Imam, when we shorten what is actually their status, or when we over-egg their status and say something that they are not, then we actually do more damage to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam than good to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. That's what I'd rather have. And I'd rather have 25 of them than 50,000 people that will not do this. Incredible statement from Imam, isn't it? This hadith, next one, comes to us from our eighth holy Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Hadith comes to us from Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Khazzaz, from Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. He says the following. This one is a very strong statement. Some of those who claim affection for us are more dangerous for our Shia than the ordeal of the Dajjal. The Dajjal, I mean, you can't get worse than that, right? In Akhir al-Zaman. I mean, it's Dajjal. He's literally the imposter Christ, not antichrist. Imposter Christ. And he will do miracles pretending he is Isa alayhi salam and drive people towards him. Some of those who claim affection for us are more dangerous for our Shia than the ordeal of the Dajjal. The companion, Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Khazzaz, asks, how do such people become so dangerous? How can a Shia be more dangerous than the ordeal of Dajjal? Imam replies, in reality, they support our enemies and antagonize our followers. When this occurs, the right becomes confused and the wrong becomes perplexed. Then there will be no distinction between the believers and the hypocrites. You see? It becomes mixed. We don't know what is truly right and what is truly wrong. The Kufans said, we're with you. But they didn't really understand what it meant to be with the Imam, because they still mixed loyalties with Banu Umayyah. Can you see? There's a dua that is given to us to help us overcome this. Dua is from our sixth holy Imam, Jaffer ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. And I'd like you to write it down. Please open your phones, your emails, your apps, your WhatsApp, whatever you want to do. I mentioned this dua before, but it's very important that we recite this dua on a regular basis to make sure that we don't fall foul of what the Shia of Kufa became, or what here Imam Rida alayhi salam is speaking about how sometimes the Shia mix truth and falsehood. It becomes one, and then they can't tell the difference between the two. Imam says the following, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, Allahumma arini al-haqqa haqqan fattabi'ahu. Allahumma arini al-haqqa haqqan fattabi'ahu. Oh Allah, show me truth as truth really is, so I follow it. وَأَرِنِ الْبَاطِلَ بَاطِلًا فَاجْتَنِبَهُ. وَأَرِنِ الْبَاطِلَ بَاطِلًا فَاجْتَنِبَهُ. And show me batil, falsehood, as it truly is, so I turn away from it. One of the maraji' Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi, may Allah preserve him, Marja of Karbala, he has a sermon. In there he says, في الدنيا الحق والباطل متشابهين. Often in this world, haq and batil become so mixed up. You don't know what is the right and what is the wrong. So many people are going this way, so many causes are going this way, so many people are saying this, so many people are saying that. One speaker says this, one speaker says that. One movement goes this way, one movement goes that way. And we all fall between the cracks. We don't know where truth lies often. There's a dua to help us to be able to see clearly. Allahumma arini al-haqqa haqqan fattabi'ahu wa arini al-batila batilan fajtanibahu. So here on one side, Imam alayhi salam says that there are some Shia that are more dangerous than the ordeal of the Dajjal. They're going to do worse things for our Shia than even Dajjal in that period of time. Subhanallah. On the other side, there are some Shia who have worked so diligently, been so much akin, in step with Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam praise them in a way that their merits are unmatched in human history. There are certain Shia, the time of Imam alayhi salam, the fifth and the sixth Imam, as an example. We mentioned him a few nights ago in one of our discussions by the name of Zurara bin A'yun, as an example. Another Muhammad bin Muslim, companions of the fifth and the sixth Imam. You know what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says about Zurara? Zurara is not ma'soom. He's an ordinary human being in the sense that he's not born from a ma'soom, he's not a ma'soom. Do you know what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says? He says, Zurara bin A'yun is the otad of this religion. Does anyone remember what we said otad means? It's a tent peg. What does a tent peg do? What does it do for the tent? What does the pegs do? Holds it steady. So that even if the most voracious of winds blow it, the peg holds the tent down, doesn't allow it to blow away. Imagine the statement from a ma'soom. He says, my companion is like the peg that holds this deen of Allah steady. Can you imagine that there is a lofty level where the deen can be entrusted to these people? I'd rather 25 of these than 50,000 of those. Can you see? I'd rather one person who just holds fast to what we say, who says nothing about us but the truth, is diligent and loyal, fulfills his duties to us, than 50,000 people who will claim to be an army for us but not be an army for us, Imam says. And we see it so often. Every day in our ziyarah, when we come here, when we go to Karbala, we have a ziyarah for the Ansar. Can you imagine? This is an imam giving salam to non-ma'soom. And then we copy these salam. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara dinillah. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Fatimat al-Zahra. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu alaikum ya ansar Abi Abdullah al-Husayn. You say it. Every Thursday night in Ziyarah Warith. We actually give from an Imam Ma'soom's qawl. He is praising so much. He's not only making a ziyarah to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. He's not only giving a ziyarah to Ali al-Akbar. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara dinillah. My Imam salutation upon you. Imagine this for a second. You and I are raised to a lofty station where Imam salutes us because we remain so steadfast and diligent to the movement of the Imam. You will know on the night in which Habib ibn Madahir comes to the tents of Karbala, he arrives and there's a tumult. Everyone's greeting him. Everyone's overjoyed. Everyone's, sort of happy inside the tent. Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam wants to know, what's the clamor outside? She sends Sayyidah Fidda alayhi salam, go and check what's happening outside. She comes back and says, Habib has come. What does she say? Send my salutations to Habib. What does Habib say? Who is Habib to receive the salutations of Lady Zainab alayhi salam? Assalamu alaikum ya ansara dinillah. There are some Shia who are worse than Dajjal. They'll do worse for the movement than the ordeal of Dajjal. And there are some who Imam will salute to you. Can you imagine the level of the outcome of such persons? May Allah make us of that group, and not of the previous group, inshaAllah. But it requires us to think and to be diligent in our own time, in how we participate in our communities, how we engage in our communities. Last hadith, and then I want to be able to mention some context, inshaAllah. This hadith comes to us from our seventh holy Imam, Musa ibn Jaffer al-Kadhim, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'een. Companion by the name of Abdullah al-Kinani. Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam says, O Shia, your enemies are numerous. In Dua al-Iftitah, we actually say this. وَكَثْرَةَ عَدُوِّنَا وَقِلَّةَ عَدَدِنَا وَشِدَّةِ الْفِتْنِ بِنَا وَتَظَاهُرَ الزَّمَانِ عَلَيْنَا. We actually exclaim in our dua, oh Allah, our enemies have outnumbered us and our friends are very few. Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam says, O Shia, your enemies are numerous. All people antagonize you. Hence, you should keep up good appearances as much as possible. What does the Imam say is the solution, the way to be steadfast? Have good akhlaq. Be good in your appearance, in the way in which you interact with people. We have many challenges, and sometimes, as per the inference of this Imam's statement where he says, I'd rather you not even be with us. Sometimes when we participate in certain things, we are the ones to cause more problems for Imam's movement or even for ourselves in our own communities. Sometimes it's the smallest of arguments that breaks a community. Sometimes it's the smallest of issues that become the biggest of issues within a community. We haven't learned to control our own egos, put the pin back in the grenade to be able to stop those nonsensical fights that erupt within our communities. We think we're actually fighting on behalf of Imam and Haqq. Imam says, Allahumma arinil haqqa haqqan. Show me haqq as it actually is. Unveil it from me so I don't get confused. فَاتَّبِعَهُ, so that I may follow what I'm actually supposed to be following and fighting for. Sometimes I can give you serious examples, and sometimes I can give you silly examples of what happens within our communities. Some communities, I've seen it with my own eyes, on the night of the 8th of Muharram, the night of Abu Fadl alayhi salam's, the commemoration of his istishhad in Karbala, is a tradition in some Khawaja communities to be able to give what sweet? Laddu. And everybody wants to be able to give it on that night. And if you bring it first ahead of me, I'll get very upset that my donation wasn't accepted. And literally, I kid you not, in some communities, it's come to blows, fist fights on the 8th night of Muharram because one family who normally gives the laddu, another one came and brought another instead. True or not? Have you not heard about these things? I've seen it. Can you imagine where on the 8th night, it's more important for me and my family to give this than your family. And so I'm willing to go to blows with you. Are we helping Imam? No. Are we ruining on behalf of Imam? Of course. I would rather you not be with me than be with me. He says, don't stand up for me. If this is what you're going to be like, if this is what's more important to you on this night, I'd rather you not stand up. There's one community, may Allah bless them, there was some paperwork put out recently, very recently, paperwork put out about some code of conduct in the community. One person got upset, said, I didn't like this code of conduct, wrote a nasty email. Another nasty email got written back, another one written over what? A code of conduct within the community. It actually led to people in the managing committee quitting over it. How do you go? How does it escalate so quickly within our communities? I kid you not. This actually happens. You all see it every time, from time to time, that these things happen within our communities. We also have much more serious issues that take place within our communities. Imam is saying to the Shia, if I can't trust you in certain spaces, if I can't have you as proper leaders and as proper representatives of my faith, then don't put yourself into the spaces where actually it is better that you do not go. You're telling me you're going to come to the battlefield, but if you go forth to the battlefield, then actually you're going to cause me more problems. There are some spaces that actually I don't want you to be in because you're not yet ready or capable or trustworthy in those spaces. We have this one as well. It's very serious within our communities. Sometimes we have interfaith programs. And sometimes those people on other faiths, they have views that are not permissible and in keeping with us. Certain times our maraji al-kiram have actually prohibited us from standing next to certain people. Did you know that? We can't be on a platform with certain people. We can't share the stage. We can't visit certain places because it's prohibited for us. The most famous and obvious one is the Zionist regime, the illegal entity of Israel. It's not permissible for us to be on the same stage with them. How often do we see many of our Shia who don't know the rules that are upon them, don't know the boundaries that we have within our school, go and participate in these very same behaviors? Or with the LGBTQ. There are certain boundaries that we have. Yes, for example, there are certain things that we can do, there are certain things that we can't do. Not everyone in every scenario can we share a stage with. But yet, if you don't know the rulings that are upon you, what you'll find is many people actually be on those stages. I remember I had the honor of hosting or organizing Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi to do a program for the Prime Minister of Iceland. This is a couple of years ago. It was an online program during pandemic, and it was a program about the environment. And the office of the Prime Minister of Iceland organized for religious scholars to come together and to talk about the environment. The highest religious, there was representatives of the Pope, and the only marja that represented was Sayyid al-Marja al-Mudarrisi, and we organized for him to go. When his wakil was talking to me, you know what his wakil said to me? He said, are there going to be any Zionists on the panel at the same time in which Sayyid al-Marja al-Mudarrisi is going to be speaking? Because if there is, then he can't participate. Absolute zero tolerance, no exceptions. If you don't know your boundaries as Shia or as Muslims, and you don't know your duties, and you put yourself into a position that you don't realize is actually more harmful, acknowledging and normalizing ties with those who are actually the enemies of humanity, then tomorrow, what is the difference between those Shia of Kufa who normalized Banu Umayyah? Said, yeah, we're with you, Yabna Rasulullah. But the moment Banu Umayyah gave the slightest of threats, 18,000 swords turned against Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And you see, we have boundaries. Similarly, even in the political sphere, we have boundaries, not just interfaith. Many times, Muslims are taking all of these accolades and awards from a far-right Islamophobic government, taking OBEs and MBEs, going into the White House, shaking hands with the president, going into number 10, shaking hands. Actually, you have to think, are these people doing more disservice representing us or service? What have we gained from these people? Are we allowed to be able to sit in this way with these people? Think about these things very carefully. When Imam Sajjads alayhi salam gives this example for us, and he says, I'd rather you not stand with me. In what contexts does it apply to us? Sometimes there are people who do more damage for the cause, and in what context do those manifest themselves? Think about those things. Sometimes we also do damage to the Imam's cause when we focus on things that are very tertiary and not the primary causes of the problems that are occurring in our communities. We see big problems that are occurring, but we're not willing to talk about them, not willing to address them. There are people who are apostatizing, leaving Islam. There are violences like domestic violence against our sisters. There are real problems. There's drugs, alcohol, pornography, addiction within our community. If they're not addressed, but the program is more, hey, let's bring the speaker to do as much wahwa as possible, get as many Nara Haydaris as possible, and what's actually happening in the community is not addressed, or the problems of the community or the youth are not addressed, and we're not resolving these problems, then actually we're causing more harm to Imam than good. In our communities, there are real issues at hand that need to be addressed. This is the perfect time where we have the biggest gathering to address the problems. How often do you see the speaker rather spending 10 nights, every night, talking about the same thing that we've heard for 100 years, rather than actually addressing the issues that are in play in the times in which we live in? Not a single time. How many times this Muharram did you hear about the burning of the Quran? The Quran was burnt and allowed to be burnt by Western governments. Which speaker raised a finger against it? Think about these things very carefully. Are we doing more good or more harm for the Imam's movement? Tell me this. If your house is on fire, if your house is burning, and you see a pile of dust in the corner, you're going to stop to hoover up the dust? It would be nonsensical, wouldn't it? To stop and hoover up the dust. To focus on something that is so minor, doesn't matter right now. When the house is on fire. When our communities have so many different issues to tackle. And if we're not addressing them and speaking about them, and then youth are leaving the deen, youth are being corrupted, issues are occurring, and actually we're doing more of a disservice to the Imam's movement. These things have to be thought about and have to be addressed. So when the Imam says to his own Shia, I'd rather you not rise with me than rise with me, what does he mean by this statement in the context of our own time? This is something that I want to leave you and I to think about this afternoon, inshaAllah. Imam Sajjads alayhi salam wasn't just shackled on the 11th of Muharram to leave Karbala for Kufa and Kufa for Damascus. Imam Sajjads alayhi salam was even shackled when he was arrested in Medina and forced to go to Damascus again. Think about this very carefully. Imam had seen so much trial and turmoil in Damascus. You would hope that when he left Damascus to go back to Medina, it would be the last time that he would ever have to see the walls of Sham again. This is an Imam who, when he was asked, what was the most difficult time for you? What did he say? Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. But this was not the last time Imam was forced to go to Damascus. One narration says, this narration actually comes from the biggest Sunni alim of the time of Medina, at the time of Banu Umayyah, by the name of Az-Zuhri. Az-Zuhri narrates this. He says, the Caliph Abdul Malik ibn Marwan al-Umawi, he arrested Imam Sajjads alayhi salam in Medina and demanded that he be extradited to Sham where he was. He has to come to the Caliph again. Az-Zuhri says, Imam Sajjads alayhi salam was placed with a heavy iron yoke around his neck and his arms were bound. This is again, Imam Sajjads alayhi salam has to suffer this consequence. Az-Zuhri, recognizing the stature of Imam Sajjads alayhi salam, runs to him and says to him, Yabna Rasulullah, I wish I didn't have to see you in this sorry state. I wish I didn't have to see you with an iron yoke around your neck, surrounded by the guards of the Caliph, being forced to leave Medina again, but this time going to Damascus, going to Kufa, going to Damascus, going to Sham. Imam Sajjads alayhi salam responds and he says, I swear by Allah, I will not leave the boundaries of Medina with these shackles on me. The narration continues, it says, 4 days had passed. Az-Zuhri went to go check on the situation of Imam Sajjads and why the soldiers of the Caliph still remained on the edge of Medina. He got there and he inquired, where is Ali ibn al-Hussein Zaynal Abidin? They said, by Allah, we didn't keep our eyes away from him for a moment, nor did any of us sleep, but he left his chains. He left his chains. Az-Zuhri proceeded towards Damascus. The hadith says that he reaches the Caliph and he asks him, what was this incident of Imam Sajjads alayhi salam? He says, in those days, the Caliph says, in those days in which the soldiers were supposed to bring him to me, somehow miraculously he escaped those chains, but he came to me. He appeared in front of me. Zaynul Abidin appeared in front of me in those 4 days in front of me. Zaynul Abidin asked me a question. Imam Sajjads said, who am I and who are you? Just those words. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am, Ali ibn al-Hussein? And who are you? You are from Banu Umayyah. I am from Banu Hashim. I'm the grandson of the Prophet. You are the grandson of Abu Sufyan. Do you know who I am and do you know who you are? The Caliph responded by saying, those words shook me and petrified me, such that if you looked at me, even my clothes would shake. Zuhri says in the hadith, I told him, to the Caliph, I said, you have misunderstood Zaynal Abidin. You have misunderstood the reality of whom this man is. Imagine this man standing in front of you and I in Kufa and in Damascus with shackles upon him, that he could free himself at any moment that he wished. And he has to say to them, do you know who I am? For those of you who don't know me, I will introduce to you who I am. I am the son of that man who went on Mi'raj. I am the son of that man who visited Sidratul Muntaha. I am the son of that man who went on the wings of Buraq. And I am the son of that man who won at the battles of Khaybar and Khandaq. I am the son of that man who will divide Jannah. And then he comes to the story of his father. And I am the son of that man who was left in the plains of Karbala without any ghusl and without any kafan for the wild beasts to circulate around him. Imagine if Sajjad had recited the maqtal in full of his father. I am the son of that man who went into sajda before he was martyred. I am the son of that man who was beheaded and his head placed upon a spike. I am the son of that man whose body was trampled upon by the horse's hooves. I am the son of that man whose finger was cut off and they tried to steal the ring from him. I am the son of that man who asked for water for his 6-month-old baby, but rather they shot my baby brother with an arrow. I am the son of that man who said, so long as I am alive, do not attack my women and children, but they showered arrows onto the tents of the women and children whilst he was alive. I am the son of that man who begged for water, but they said to him, O Hussein, you will not have water until you reach the pitfalls of hell. I am the son of that man. I am the son of that man whose mother Fatima now has the shirt of Hussein, and she will present it on the day of judgment, and she will say, Oh Allah, take revenge on my behalf. Can you imagine what a sermon of Sajjad alayhi salam would have been? In these days, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is sitting in a dungeon, the like of which has no cover to stop the heat from coming in and the cold from coming in. It is said in the books of Maqtal that the heat was so hot in the day and the cold was so cold in the night that on the women's faces and on their hands it started to take such an effect that their hands and their face started to turn color, started to become so bruised that if you looked at them, their faces had changed. If you looked at them, you would not realize who they are. This is not only a dungeon like this, but next to that dungeon, Yazid is lying comfortably in his bed, and he has the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on a plate. And you can imagine in these days, Sakina calling out to her father, Oh father, where are you? They keep coming in and slapping us. They keep taking us out and parading us. They keep taking us out. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam has a hadith where he says, 6 things happened to us in Damascus that had not happened anywhere else on our trials. He says, when we got to the great gate of Damascus, we were forced to stand outside Bazar al-Sham whilst they decorated the palace of Yazid. When we entered into Bazar al-Sham, they paraded us from one area to another. They took us to the area of the Christians and the Jews, and they said to them, these are the children of those who defeated you at Khaybar and Khandaq. Now you may mock them, for we have taken them captive. We were paraded. They began to throw stones at us. They threw boiling water at us. One lady, she took a piece of wood, she set it alight, and she threw it at Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. I want you to imagine Imam's arms are bound. His body is being hurt by the fire. How does Imam
Imam Sajjad put that fire out. Then Imam Sajjad says in the Maqtal that they took the women and children to the area where they would sell slaves. They tried to sell Zainab off as a slave. They tried to sell Kulthum off as a slave. They tried to sell Ruqayya off as a slave. These are the words of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Eventually, the Caliph Abdul Malik poisons Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. The poison goes through his body. It turns his body this way and that. But then he is lying on that deathbed of his. It is said that his son Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam is sitting by his side, sitting by his chest. He looks towards his son al-Baqir. He says, "Oh my son al-Baqir, right now you are sitting by my chest. But do you know who was sitting on the chest of my father when he was in his last moments? They kicked Hussein ibn Ali over. Shimr stood over him. He grabbed him by the beard and he pulls him towards him. Oh Muhammad al-Baqir." At this point the heavens began to shake. The earth began to shake. Fatima al-Zahra must have come from the heavens. She must have been saying, "Oh Shimr, what are you doing to my beloved son Hussein?" ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Oh Allah, hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. Allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. Ya Allah, help us to be like the Shia that the Imam demands. Oh Allah, grant us the ziyarah of Imam Sajjad fi dunya wal akhirah. Whatever hajat that we have, Ya Allah, accept them. Bihaqq Sajjad alayhi salam. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein. Matim Sajjad, Ya Sajjad. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein. یہ سوچ کے روتا ہوں ماں بہنیں کھلے سر ہیں کس طرح سے دیکھوں گا جو سامنے منظر ہے نیزے پہ ہے ایک سر روتا ہے جو اکثر کرتا ہے جو نوحہ لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ لو آ گیا بازار لو آ گیا بازار لو آ گیا بازار لو سب مل کے ماشاءاللہ لو ہر ایک قدم بابا قرآن سناتا ہے اور آگے کے پتھر خود چہرے پہ وہ کھاتا ہے زہرا کا دلارا احمد کا نواسا ہے برسر نیزا لو آ گیا بازار لو لو آ یا بازار لو آ یا بازار لو اے پردے کا محافظ آپ سر اپنا گراتا ہے، خون روتا ہے وہ غازی جب بھی نظر آتا ہے، زینب کا کھلا سر اور شام کا منظر، سر پہ نہیں پردہ، لو گیا بازار، لو اور شمر یہ عابد سے کس فخر سے کہتا ہے، پردہ تیری زینب کا نیزے سے اتارا ہے، قوت ہے یہ میری احمد کی نواسی کو شام میں لایا، لو گیا بازار، لو گیا بازار، لو گیا بازار، لو گیا بازار، لو گیا بازار۔ اور شمر یہ عابد سے کس فخر سے کہتا ہے، پردہ تیری زینب کا نیزے سے اتارا ہے، قوت ہے یہ میری احمد کی نواسی کو شام میں لایا، لو گیا بازار، لو گیا بازار، لو گیا بازار۔ وہ ننھی سکینہ کو مانگا ہے کنیزی میں، میں مرتا ہوں جیتے جی ماحول شرابی میں، گھبراتی ہے بچی اور ہو کے میں بھائی کچھ کر نہیں سکتا، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار۔ موت آئے گی زندہ میں پیاری میری بہنا کو، ہاتھوں سے بناؤں گا میں قبر سکینہ کی، وہ خون بھرا کرتا ہر ایک تماچا یہ اس کو ہے سہنا، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار۔ جج نے ہرگز نہیں دیکھا تھا، اے پردہ کھڑی تھی وہ شیطانوں کا مجمع تھا، چہرے کو تجانی بالوں سے چھپائی پڑھتی رہی خطبہ، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار، لو آ گیا بازار۔ سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا سب مل کے ماشاءاللہ، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، ہاتھوں میں رسیاں پاؤں میں بیڑیاں، ہاتھوں میں رسیاں پاؤں میں بیڑیاں، گر گر کے اٹھ رہا تھا بیمار ناتواں، غم و رنج سے جگر چاک تھا، لہو سے بھرا وہ پوشاک تھا، گرا طوق کا تھا گردن پہ ہار،
سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ
آنکھوں سے خوب بہایا غیرت کے نام میں،
ہاں آنکھوں سے خوب بہایا غیرت کے نام میں،
بے پردہ مائیں بہنیں
بازار شام میں تماشائیوں رلاتے رہے، ستم پر ستم وہ ڈھاتے رہے، تھا چاروں طرف سے پتھر کا وار، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا آسان، سجاد کا
وہ امتحان، سجاد سینے پہ سونے والی گرتی تھی خاک پر،
سینے پہ سونے والی گرتی تھی خاک پر،
بچی پہ تو نے ڈھایا
ہر ایک ستم شمر، ردا چھن گئی چھنی بالیاں، تماچے لگے کبھی سیلیاں، اٹھائے ستم وہ دل پر ہزار، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ
امتحان،
سجاد کا
تشنا لبی کا عالم بچی تھی نوح گر،
تشنا لبی کا عالم بچی تھی نوح گر،
پانی بہا کے ظالم
چلتی زمین پر یہ ہنس کر کہا وہ امو تیرا کدھر کھو گیا، دل پہ بکا سکینہ کی غازی بار بار، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ
امتحان،
سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد
بولا یزید ہنس کر اے بنت مرتضیٰ،
بولا یزید ہنس کر اے بنت مرتضیٰ،
اب آسرا تمہارا
کوئی نہیں رہا، تو بالوں سے منہ چھپا کے کہا میں بنت علی ہوئے بے حیا، ذرا آزما کے دیکھ ایک بار، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد
سجاد کی اذان رک سکتی نہیں کبھی،
سجاد کی اذان رک سکتی نہیں کبھی،
دنیا کو اب تجانی
پیغام دو یہی، جو بھی روکنے کی کوشش کرے عزائے حسین وہ سب جان لے، انہی پہ ہے لعنت بے شمار، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا وہ امتحان، سجاد کا سجاد کا وہ امتحان،
محمد پاس نہیں ہے، قاسم کا لاشا ہے ٹکڑے، بازو کٹا کے میرا غازی سو گیا ہے دریا کے کنارے، غربت میں تھی شہ کی صدا، حل من ناصر ینصرنا، هل من ناصر ينصرنا 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 هل من ناصر دیکھو ضعیفی رن میں شہ کی باپ ہے بوڑھا بیٹا جوان ہے لاش اکبر کیسے اٹھائیں کتنا کٹھن یہ امتحان ہے کاندھے پہ رکھ کے شہ نے کہا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حسین حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا جلتی زمین پر شاہ پڑے ہیں شمر سوار ہے آپ سینے پر سوکھی زبان ہے گرم ہوا ہے گردن پہ چلتا ہے خنجر ایک ایک ضرب پہ شہ نے کہا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حسین حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من سرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا کتنے ستم سجاد نے جھیلے درے لگتے تھے اور پتھر ہاتھ پسے گردن تو بندھے تھے دیکھ کے عابد بولے رو کر غازی کا سر فوق نیزا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا کربل میں عاشور کا دن تھا زینب خیمے کے در پہ کھڑی تھی بھائی کو ذبح ہوتے ہوئے وہ آنکھوں سے دیکھتی ہائے تجانی بولی حزین کربلا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حسین حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر ینصرنا حل من ناصر اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی تیرے در پہ استغاثہ ہے تیرا ممنون میری شاہزادی یہ جہاں سارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا تیرے روزے کا جو نظارہ ہے ہر گنہگار کا سہارا ہے تیرے روزے کا جو نظارہ ہے ہر گنہگار کا سہارا ہے آسماں پر جو یہ گٹائیں ہیں تیری چادر کا ایک کنارہ ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا ماشاءاللہ یا زہرا یا زہرا ہم کو ہر آن یہ ندامت ہے، ہم ہیں مجرم تیری عدالت ہے.
ہم کو ہر آن یہ ندامت ہے، ہم ہیں مجرم تیری عدالت ہے. رزق اولاد زندگی ہر پل جو بھی کچھ ہے تیری بدولت ہے. یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا.
تجھ کو امت نے یوں ستایا ہے، مرگ محسن پہ بھی رلایا ہے.
تجھ کو امت نے یوں ستایا ہے، مرگ محسن پہ بھی رلایا ہے. تجھ کو بابا کے بعد امت نے آئے دربار میں بلایا ہے. یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا.
فرش مجلس پہ اور مصلی پر ہر جوان کہہ رہا ہے رو رو کر.
فرش مجلس پہ اور مصلی پر ہر جوان کہہ رہا ہے رو رو کر. ہم رہے نہ رہے مگر بی بی تا قیامت رہے غم سرور. یا زہرا سب مل کے ماشاءاللہ. یا زہرا یا زہرا کیوں ماشاءاللہ. یا زہرا
وقت آخر ہے بس میرا بی بی، انگنت ہے میرے گناہ بی بی.
وقت آخر ہے بس میرا بی بی، انگنت ہے میرے گناہ بی بی. واسطہ تجھ کو تیرے بچوں کا بخشوانا میرے گناہ بی بی. یا زہرا یا زہرا
مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین،
مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین.
وہ عابد بیمار تھا،
وہ عابد بیمار تھا،
وہ عابد بیمار تھا،
وہ عابد بیمار تھا.
وہ چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا،
چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا. اور شام کا بازار تھا، اور شام کا بازار تھا. اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیاں مولا حق امام حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
محمد آل محمد. سورة المبارك الفاتحة. Before we proceed to Ziyarat, can I also request you to recite Surah Fatiha for Marhum Javed Bhai Naqvi? It's his family who sponsored today's majalis, and also the Marumins of Nak Javed Bhai and Nadim Aunty. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all the Marumins. May I also thank Abbas and Shabir for coming over. I don't know if they remember, you've been here once before, many years ago. So thank you so much and blessing this occasion with your recitation. Those of you who don't know, their grandmother was part of this community in the sense that she used to visit us from Singida. And they used to come, and she was the one who started the ladies' majalises when she used to come. So can I also request you all to recite Surah Fatiha for their grandmother? Bismillah. And inshallah, Thursday night is the 20th of the Shahadat Karbala. So please, if you are able to come, then please try and make every effort to attend. Salawat.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
أزور سيدي ومولاي ومعتمدي ورجائي وذخري وذخيرتي في دنياي وآخرتي مولاي أبا الحسن علي بن الحسين عليه الصلاة والتسليم أصالة عن نفسي ونيابة عن والدي ووالدي والدي وعن إخواني وأخواتي وعن جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات بالخصوص من قلدني الزيارة والدعاء قربة إلى الله تعالى. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا زين العابدين، السلام عليك يا زين المتهجدين، السلام عليك يا إمام المتقين، السلام عليك يا درة الصالحين، السلام عليك يا ولي المسلمين، السلام عليك يا قرة عين الناظرين العارفين، السلام عليك يا خلف السابقين، السلام عليك يا وصي الوصيين، السلام عليك يا خازن وصايا المرسلين، السلام عليك يا ضوء المستوحشين، السلام عليك يا نور المجتهدين، السلام عليك يا سراج المرتاضين، السلام عليك يا ذخر المتعبدين، السلام عليك يا مصباح العالمين، السلام عليك يا سفينة العلم، السلام عليك يا سكينة الحلم، السلام عليك يا ميزان القصاص، السلام عليك يا سفينة الخلاص، السلام عليك يا بحر الندى، السلام عليك يا بدر الدجى، السلام عليك أيها الأواه الحليم، السلام عليك أيها الصابر الحكيم، السلام عليك يا رئيس البكائين، السلام عليك يا مصباح المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أبا محمد، أشهد أنك حجة الله وابن حجته وأبو حججه وابن أمينه وأبو أمنائه، وأنك ناصحت في عباد ربك وسارعت في مرضاته وخيبت أعداءه وسررت أولياءه. أشهد أنك قد عبدت الله حق عبادته واتقيته حق تقاته وأطعته حق طاعته حتى أتاك اليقين. فعليك يا مولاي يا ابن رسول الله أفضل التحية والسلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أخيه أبي الفضل العباس وأختي الحوراء زينب الكبرى. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.